And welcome, rugby fans, to Rugby411. As always, I'm your host. My name is Joshua Shibata, and this video is breaking down the MLR Dispersal draft that just recently happened. Well, recently, it was about a week ago. And little parentheses here, if you can read it, is what we know of it by Rugby411. That is me. There's little caveats to this, and the reason why this video was created a little bit later, like I mentioned before, the dispersal draft supposedly happened back on November 11th, which is about a week ago. This is being filmed Wednesday the 16th. It will probably be up tomorrow, or today is Thursday. And the reason why it took a while is because, for whatever reason, Major League Rugby were not open to the public of what the results of the draft were. A lot of the information has been posted online through several sources, but no one source could really confirm the information was true until finally pretty much everybody kind of got the same amount of information. And I decided, especially with certain sources that I trusted myself, including America's Rugby News, which is a wonderful website. I'm going to put the information down in the info box of this video so you guys can look it up for everything involving the Americas. So not only North America, but South America as well is one of the best resources. They also do a lot of Major League Rugby news. Once they put up the same draft results that many other websites have put up, I decided, okay, we can confirm this, or at least what we know of until it's pretty much denied. But it made a lot of sense, and it's very, very interesting. So I'm going to put up the results, and we'll kind of break down the information of this draft, who went where, and also, too, kind of go over the possible roster of the newest franchise of Major League Rugby. If you haven't been aware, if you're new to Major League Rugby is the pro league for rugby here in the United States. It's been around for about, now they're going into their 6th year, if I'm correct, including 1 year, which unfortunately was shut down by COVID. And unfortunately, after certain instances of last year, 2 franchises have been shut down. The LA Guiltinis, may they rest in peace, the former reigning and defending MLR champions, and the Austin Gilgronis. And so because both of those franchises were shut down, and a new franchise is as of yet named Chicago franchise, there was a dispersal draft for the players that were owned by, that were LA and Austin players, will now be put into this dispersal draft to basically form the Chicago roster, as well as in this draft, other teams were allowed access to players from Austin and LA, as well as each team, each franchise that is currently competing in Major League Rugby would put 5 of their players into the dispersal draft, and they would be up for grabs by any team, including the Chicago team. The way that from what we understand, the way that the dispersal draft worked was that the Chicago team, once they drafted the players that were owned by either LA or Austin, they have a 1-week period. So basically, today, they had 1 week to negotiate a contract and have that player sign. If the player chose not to sign that contract, they had 1 additional week after to then talk to any other team in the Major League Rugby. If a deal with the other Major League Rugby teams could not come up, then the contract rights of that player goes back to Chicago. Now, there were a few players that the Chicago team drafted that were not of LA or Austin origin, including 7 players, which we'll break down. The Chicago team had 2 weeks to negotiate with those players. If they can come up with a contract, those players will then become Chicago players. If not, the rights to those players go back to their original team. Interestingly enough, Old Glory DC is the only team that did not take part in this dispersal draft, and players from LA and Austin that decided not to be included into this draft, unfortunately, they would have to wait until mid-season of this 2023 season coming up to renegotiate with other teams and possibly play for the remainder of the Major League Rugby season 2023. So, with that being said, we'll go over the draft, and I'm going to put up the results of where the players went to right here. Bam. And obviously, the most of the players went to Chicago because Chicago had to build up their roster. 30 players were drafted by Chicago, and then other teams took part in taking some of the other players. We'll go over those players first because there's a lot to digest with the Chicago team, but we'll go over all the other teams first. So, team number one that we'll go over is formerly the new kids on the block, the Dallas Jackals, everybody's favorite second team, or at least my favorite second team. They picked up Michael DeWall from Austin. They picked up a couple of LA players, including Langy, the Samoan Savage, a very talented lock from LA, Andrew Tuwala, a very talented hooker from LA, and then one of my favorite players, former England Sevens rugby captain, Tom Mitchell, who is now part of Dallas, making me really kind of want to root more for Dallas because Tom Mitchell is a class act of a guy. If you ever get a chance, Dallas players, if you ever get a chance to talk to Tom Mitchell before, after games, he is a wonderful, wonderful guy to talk to. So, those are the new players for Dallas. If they sign them, Houston picked up some very talented players. Look no further than Honko Hermeshais, former LA player, former USA Eagles. He scored 8 tries last season. That's the most tries scored that season for the LA Guillotines, nicknamed the Terminator. Interestingly enough, I was kind of shocked that Chicago didn't pick him up because he's such a talented, very hard-hitting, aggressive young player. He is going to definitely boost the Houston roster. Also, they picked up Dominic Aquina from Austin and another LA player, the fast speedster DeMonte Noble, who has some rugby sevens experience as well. Team number 3, we're looking at New England. Oddly enough, with New England, they picked up the 2 former Canadian players from LA, including the very talented center Ben Lesage, who once he came from Toronto to LA, he scored 4 tries and was a dominant presence in the LA team. And then DeJustice Sears Dura, a prop for LA, another talented player that LA picked up from Toronto as well. So both former Toronto Canadian players are now New England players. Number 4 team that we're looking at is, if I look at my list, New Orleans. Nola Gold picked up a couple of very talented young players, including Jordan Trainer, who for the time, he's a young New Zealander. From the time he played in the Guillotines as their fullback, he really shined, in my opinion, had a lot of potential. I'm very curious to see how his career goes in Major League Rugby, and now he's with New Orleans. Mason Cock for a former Austin Gilgroynes player, another young talented player, and then the veteran Australian player Will Chambers, a center and winger for LA. Very dynamic player. He suffered a couple of injuries last season that kind of slowed him down, but hopefully he'll be all healed up and ready to go for the 2023 season. Team number 5 we're looking at is the Atlanta Rugby ATL, who picked up some very talented young players that have a lot of potential, including Connor Mooneyham, who interestingly enough went number 9 in this dispersal draft, but he was the former first draft pick ever. Actually, that's not true. There was a draft for the Dallas team, but the actual first collegiate draft, Connor Mooneyham was the number 1 round pick, and he is now part of Rugby ATL, has a bright future ahead of him. And then Christian Poidevin, nicknamed Prince, from the LA Guillotines, a second-generation rugby player, also a very talented young player that has a lot of potential. Atlanta picked up 2 very talented young players that could have a bright future with Rugby ATL. New York picked up some young prospects as well. Brooklyn Hardacre, a former winger for LA. And then Christian Rodriguez, a very talented utility back, both scrum half, fly half, played a little winger for the LA Guillotines. Sad to see him go. He was one of the most popular players in the LA team. He usually brought at least like 30 fans and friends and family members to each game, so he always had a lot of support. Now he's a New York player. Will be interesting to see how the East Coast treats Christian Rodriguez. But again, 2 very young, talented players, bright futures in New York. San Diego picked up Corey Thomas, a Canadian player, formerly of Los Angeles, as well as Fakasafioli Pifaletti of the Austin Gilgronis. Team number 8 that we're looking at, the Seattle Seawolves, picked up Mason Peterson and Jake Turnbull, both formerly of the Austin Gilgronis. Jake Turnbull, one of the most talented props in Major League Rugby, scored 5 tries last season, is a dominant force. Seattle picked up a very good player in Jake Turnbull and Mason Peterson. Number 9, Toronto picked up Lindsey Stevens, formerly of the LA Giltinis, and Kyle Brickenbrock of the Austin Gilgronis. And Utah, the last team we're looking at, they picked up young academy grown LA player Sam Perry. Didn't really get much time to play on the main roster, but was picked up and groomed from their LA academy. Pete Cowley from the Austin Gilgronis and Khalid Cannon, both of those players, again, also young players as well. So Utah also picking some very young prospects to possibly grow in their system. Okay, now looking at the roster of Chicago. I mean, you know, I mentioned this before in a video earlier that this draft would basically give Chicago the chance to form, in my opinion, and, you know, I'll have facts to prove it, to back it up, a super team of basically rosters of 2 of the strongest teams from last year, the LA Giltinis and the Austin Gilgronis, who, I'm not going to mince words, I had a good feeling that one of them, as much as I love LA, one of them could have easily been the MLR champions of last season if things didn't turn out the way they did. But now you have both rosters merging into this one super team. My God, this is a stacked roster. And to be honest, I think I might have found my new favorite team to root for, considering a good majority of the players are already players that I used to root for the LA Giltinis anyways. But going over this list, and we'll go kind of quick about it. First of all, the first overall draft pick for the Dispersal draft, Bryce Campbell, USA Eagles, former captains of the USA Eagles, currently right now in the Middle East, Dubai, playing for the USA Eagles in their final qualification tournament to hopefully make the Rugby World Cup, the last spot available. They already won 2 of the games. Congratulations, by the way, to the USA Eagles for good dominant wins over Hong Kong and Kenya. They have a game coming up, the last game, winner takes all, against Portugal this Friday, and you can watch it live and absolutely free on the Rugby Network. And also a quick shout out to a lot of the people that joined me on my YouTube channel for the watch-alongs for the Hong Kong game. It was a lot of fun. I've been kind of talked into possibly doing watch-along games for Major League Rugby now that I really don't have a team to root for. I might pick a game of the week to show, so we'll not always just stick to one team, though we'll probably watch a lot of Chicago, because again, it's going to be a team that I'm very familiar with and already have been rooting for a lot of their players, if all these players do sign. So we'll possibly do that, and again, it's all going to be free on the Rugby Network, so I think it'll be a lot of fun. Join us on that. I'll have that information on my YouTube channel when and if that happens. But anyways, number 1 overall draft pick, Bryce Campbell, very talented center, again, USA Eagles experience, former captain of the USA Eagles. Number 2 pick, Luke Carty, fly half, very, very talented young player. His brother plays for, Jack Carty plays for Connacht over in Europe. Luke Carty suffered a serious injury before the start of last season. Fortunately, he's healed up. And again, when he did play for the LA Giltinis, always came in clutch as a good fly half with a great boot. Young, talented player, will be a great addition to Chicago. And then, of course, Billy Meeks. I mean, God, the guy, you're having the back of the year. One of the most talented players in Major League Rugby, and a really great guy. Former LA Giltinis, you have him on the team. Luke White from LA Giltinis, again, another great player. Charles Abel, prop. Cam Dodson, a very talented lock, formerly of the Austin Gilgronis. Hugh Roach, talented hooker who scored 7 tries last season, one of the top try scorers in Major League Rugby, formerly of Austin Gilgronis. My favorite player, DTH Vandermeer, a very talented Canadian winger, has lots of international experience, scored 10 tries prior season, unfortunately suffered a really horrible injury during this last season, so he wasn't able to play. Hopefully he'll be all healed up and ready to go for Chicago, but a dominant force on the pitch. Nason Moose de Hoyt, very talented young lock. Luke Beecham, flanker from Austin. Mac Mason, one of the top try scorers last year in Major League Rugby, as well as one of the top kickers with the top kicking percentage made. 82% of his kicks were made last season. One of the best fly halves in Major League Rugby. Very young, talented player. Macklin Jones from Austin joined the team. Mark O'Keefe, another talented winger, scored 8 tries last season. Is just an amazing quick player. Chris Matina, talented fullback for Austin. Lerone White, prop for Austin. Johnny Muscles Ryberg, formerly the LA Guillotines, and the reason why it's called Muscles, you just gotta look at him. Fast, hard-hitting player, scored 4 tries last season, one of the top try scorers for the LA Guillotines, now in the Chicago squad. Another talented winger, Julian Dominguez, scored 6 tries last season. Caleb Sturm, winger formerly of Austin. Sidney Shoop, a young halfback. Kahana Koi, another talented scrum half and winger. Kahane Koi didn't get to play a lot for the LA Guillotines, but he did play a lot of Rugby 7s for Premiership Rugby. He's been touted as one of the future stars, possibly of the 7s realm, because of his speed and just great agility. He is trying his craft with Major League Rugby, but he is fast. Christian Alvarez, talented scrum half for Austin. Nicholas Taylor, fullback. Robert Coetzee from Austin, talented hooker. James Afai, one of the non-Austin LA players to be picked by Chicago, picked by New Orleans. Jeff Steele from Utah for the props. Tommy Clark from Seattle. Kaina Lloyd as San Diego winger. Joaquin De La Vega Medina, very talented fullback or fly half for the Rugby ATLs. I'm really shocked that Rugby ATL was willing to put him up in this dispersal draft. Very glad that Chicago picked him up because Joaquin De La Vega Medina, very talented young player. Austin White from Atlanta as well. Chan Berry from the Dallas Jackals, who is another young talented player. So again, you look at this roster for Chicago. Oh my God, it is just stacked with riches. I mean, again, you look no further than just their back half. You have a center combination of Bryce Campbell and Billy Meeks. Are you kidding me? You have a combination of you have a plethora of amazing wingers. DTH Vandermeer, Mark O'Keefe, Julian Dominguez, Johnny Ryberg. I mean, you got just a load of weapons and talented players on the wingers. Your hookers, you got Hugh Roach, who's a talented hooker. He was voted a couple times for Player of the Week in the top 15s. You also have another great hooker in Robert Coetzee for Austin as well. I mean, again, so much talent. Their locks, Luke White, Cam Dodson. If you don't believe me of how talented this roster is, of these 30 players, 12 of them have been nominated as top 15 players of the week by Major League Rugby. Every week during the season, Major League Rugby picks their top 15 players. 12 of these 30 men have been nominated at least once last season, some of them multiple times. So you're talking about half of this roster being in the top 15 players of Major League Rugby. If the Chicago team does not sign all these guys, but at least a good majority of them, again, they have a stacked roster. I mean, again, just on paper, I don't know any team that would be able to compete with these guys. You know, the only thing that I would say would be the worry for Chicago is just the cohesion of working together. But again, rugby, you kind of learn how to do that if you're a professional rugby player. But it's also just hoping to sign all these guys, you know. So if they're able to do that, my God, this Chicago team will be unstoppable already, just on paper. My picks to win all next season, which again hasn't been done since LA. And mind you, half of this squad is former LA Giltini members, so it's not out of the question for this team to be that dominant. And speaking of the Chicago team, if this video is posted on Thursday, later today or early today morning, there will be a press conference by the Chicago franchise. What I've been told, it's going to be 11 a.m. local time in Chicago, which I believe is Central Time. And they are going to announce and unveil everything about the Chicago squad, their home stadium, their staff, possibly their roster, and of course, their team name. So, of course, I will be posting a video about all that information, but I'm sure, hopefully, if you follow Major League Rugby, they will have that information available as well. But again, I'll post a video breaking that stuff down as well. And again, I'm telling you guys right now, just looking at this roster, I believe I probably found my new favorite team, the Chicago squad. So again, if they have all the roster members, and of course, if this is true, it is kind of odd that the Major League Rugby did not actually make this draft official. But if this is the truth, Chicago has a very good, solid start going into the 2023 season. So that's the draft. That's the breakdown. Good luck to all the former LA Giltini players and Austin Gilgroni players in their new homes. Hopefully everything works out. I know there's been a lot of talk about how non-transparent this whole dispersal draft was to begin with. The way that the former LA and former Austin players were treated in the meantime with very little communication. Hopefully that's all been resolved. Hopefully it all works out with where they go. And hopefully, we'll have a pretty good 2023 season for Major League Rugby with no instances or bad endings like it did last season. So, but anyways, as always, I'll be following the 2023 season once rosters are official, once we start getting season started, which will, from what I understand, especially because the schedule was just released, will kick off in February right after the Super Bowl. So it literally is right around the corner. Of course, I'll also be doing what I did last year, which was a huge success, our pick'ems with the Super Brew. So if you want to join that, when I open it up, of course, I'll post that on my YouTube channel as well. And join in the Super Brew. We had a lot of fun last year just picking who you think will win each game. The top player who wins gets a t-shirt of their favorite franchise, courtesy of myself. I compete as well. I came really, really close. I think I finished like 3rd or 4th overall. But it was a lot of fun. So hopefully we had at least like 20 people play. Hopefully we can double that this coming season. Again, it's absolutely free. It's absolutely free, and you can possibly win a t-shirt of your favorite MLR franchise. So, once again, that's the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know your thoughts about this Chicago franchise, and it looks, again, like a world beater. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you on the pitch.